Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. Just 1 second. Hi. Thank you all for joining. As we already know, Valentine's week is going on, and we thought this is a great opportunity for all of us to start talking about love, intimacy, queerness, disability, and just expanding our understanding around all of these topics. So I'm really excited about two of our guests today. First is Tejasvi, and then we have No. I am Meetha Claire, project consultant at Match Project Foundation, a social enterprise building ecosystem for young change makers. Just quickly want to thank our partners who are supporting this live, media partner Daily Hunt and digital partner Josh. I'm gonna invite our first guest to just be. Give us 1 second. So Jasvi, if you're listening to me, just send me the request again. In the meantime, I'm just gonna quickly introduce the Jasvi. Yeah, okay. So Jasvi, if you're listening to me, please send the request again. Okay, so Tejasvi is a journalist, researcher, and artist whose attention is captured by post-colonial human relationships at a time of Internet of Things. They are a digital editor and curator at GAC and are also working with That Sassy Thing to build sex-positive, queer affirmative, disability-aware content around pleasure and intimacy. And we have them here. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Yeah, there's a slight lag, but
Okay.
I can hear you now. Yeah, perfect. How are you?
Okay. Hi, Medha. I'm good. How are you?
I am good too. Thank you for joining us.
The pleasure's mine. Thanks for inviting me.
Perfect. So I'm just going to dive into our questions. The first one is that Valentine's Day for me, or just like the image of Valentine's Day has been very awkward and very heteronormative for me. It's always like a man and a woman and awkwardly exchanging things. I want to understand from you, how has it been for you? What has your sort of experience around Valentine's Day?
I remember being a kid, and Valentine's Day obviously was a lot about, in school, it was like on Valentine's Day, somebody would slip in some sort of message for you or a gift for you and ask you to be their Valentine and things like that. Um, and that was always like that was romantically coded. Do you mind turning off the comments? It's very
No
distracting.
worries. Just give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah,
no, just give me 1 second. I'm figuring out how to do
sure.
this.
You tap on the three dots on the add a comment sort of
Oh,
section
yes, got it.
at the bottom of the screen,
Turn off
and then it
commenting.
will ask you to
Done.
turn off comments. Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank
No
you.
worries.
Yeah, so I feel like it was very romantically coded, and that I one of the first queer identities that I embraced was that of being ace and aro, right? Valuing relationships not just because they have a romantic or sexual connotation to them, but also like, platonicity or family and things like that. So I felt like that was terribly lacking. Like it was almost like it was taking away our attention from the relationships that we had and forcing us to only think about the relationships that we were told to value, which is like romantic relationships. And beyond that, of course, there's also this expectation that since I am a girl, I was seen as a girl, I was assigned female at birth, there is an expectation that the only person who can love me in that sense, in a romantic and sexual sense, or desire me or make me feel desirable would be someone who is assigned male at birth. But obviously, those kinds of it's not that, that's not how relationships work. Relationships are more about two people, regardless of their genitals, regardless of their own orientation, figuring out if that equation is bringing them connection, a sense of connection, or a sense of value, to their self and also like their path ahead, their life ahead. So I feel like the kind of hyper focus on romanticization of relationships took away from what a beauty and thing of joy that relationships can be if they're just allowed to be without these kinds of expectations.
No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Um, Tell me about, and is it true that we have just sort of stopped giving enough importance to our aromantic relationships, or just like in general relationships? I think we've narrowed our understanding of relationships to like very romantic, very like man-woman sort of way. So, is that also something that
Yeah.
you think? And yeah.
I think I think we've I think for the longest time I did not really understand or have a point of reference to understand like intimacy, what intimacy means, what connection means, and how it has to be performed or how it has to be expressed and how it is expressed in normative society. I'm also autistic, so a lot of these things are very coded. So, for instance, if somebody sends you flowers, what does that mean? That means that they
Yeah.
desire you in what sense? What does that mean? It's incredibly coded. Why can't I send flowers to someone, like my friend or my mother or like my cousin or my sibling or something like that, right? So a lot of these things are terribly coded. And sorry, I forgot the question that you
No
asked.
worries. I was just trying to ask, like, have we stopped giving attention to our not romantic relationships, aromantic relationships, and yeah.
Have we stopped giving attention? I hope not. Like, it's impossible for me to stop giving attention to some of the relationships that buoyed me, that took me through my teens to my, tumultuous 20s. I'm 30 now. And like the past decade, while I've had romantic partners and stuff, I've also had my friends see me through so much of it, see me through what a transformative decade that was for me. So it's impossible for me to not, to stop giving that part of my life, those relationships, my attention and my, myself, my value and whatever, however I express myself in relationships. So I hope that's not happening, but I do feel a lot of pressure to acknowledge that in societal norms and the mainstream media. There is a lot of pressure to partner up in a romantic sexual sense and like the Noah's Ark, it's almost like that.
I loved your. But okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. Now, but Valentine's Day is we specifically speak about romantic relationships on this particular day for some reason.
Yeah.
Tell me, how does, and it's also very very cisgender or very heterosexual in so many sense. So how does a person who is maybe not cisgender or maybe not in a heterosexual relationship, how do they navigate this kind of space, or how do they relate to it?
One thing I wanted to point out was that romance is there in friendships as well. A really good friend of mine shared a piece. Yeah, so a really good friend of mine sent across something yesterday, and it said, how beautiful is friendship where you have nothing to kind of there is no you're not sharing a home, you're not transferring your property to them by legal requirements. There is no
Yeah.
bond that is, socially recognized, but you continue to show up for each other day after day. What a pure, beautiful thing of joy, like relationship of joy that is. And that is so romantic, right? Like that is so beautiful that what is keeping us together is just how the waves of life keep bringing us together. We are here of our own volition. Well, of course, there are other dynamics to friendships as well, but some of the best friendships have that essence of romance to it. So, but in terms of like how I navigate Valentine's Day as someone who's queer in more ways than one is that I just focus on the relationships that I do have, and I still buy a lot of people that I care about like Valentine's Day gifts or like get them chocolates. And why not? Like, yes, that is some expectation that's been fed into us. And if I didn't send those gifts or chocolates, it's not like my friends or like people who love me are going to care any lesser. But maybe, taking that moment to just step back and say, I really like these relationships that I have today in my life. That's what I focus on instead of making it all about, a monogamous partner in my life.
No, that's beautiful. I think we've sort of like redefined romance and also redefined why Valentine's Day is important, just in case people are forgetting and
Yeah.
questioning it. I think that's really important. Okay, so another thing, like our relationships, love, intimacy is also all our references are from like very able-bodied people. How does somebody
Yeah.
who's disabled in any way, physical or has any sort of other disability, learning disability, how do they navigate through all of this? How do they learn to sort of be in relationships, or how do they interact in with intimacy? And yeah.
I can't answer for everyone, of course, but like I think disabilities, relationships, the way they have been constructed and portrayed for us in movies and even legally,
Yeah.
right? That's not necessarily how relationships work for people with, disability, who don't have able-bodied minds, or who live with a mental illness, or however. And they say, right, it takes a village to raise a
Yeah.
child, not just like two parents. And I think it takes a village for all of us, and this idea that certain people are disabled while the others are immune to it is not necessarily true. A lot of us become disabled with age. It's almost something that we cannot avoid. Disability is, yes, sometimes more of someone's identity for all their lives, but it is also an experience that is very common to most of our lives. All of us go through periods where maybe we have faced some sort of physical trauma, so we kind of are, disabilities show up in our bodies or in our
Yeah.
minds in ways that we're not been used to, and suddenly we have to embrace it. But and sometimes it shows up in childhood, so our identity builds around it, and therefore it becomes a more core part of our experience. And how we relate to people based on our relationship with our own body and mind is something that we all explore in our own ways. And what is the problem, so to speak, is that relationships in society, in law, does not allow for this exploration. It does not
Yeah.
allow for you to experiment safely, or does not allow for you to kind of build relationships in a manner where you take certain risks, or you kind of access certain information. Even when it comes to sex education, people with disabilities, people who are on certain types of medications, don't necessarily have access to information to fully understand how certain products, or how certain medications, how certain pills might affect their body, or might affect their existing medical patterns and things like that. So we don't have that steady ground to launch ourselves into that exploration, to come back home, some place to come back home to, some place to feel safe in. Feels like everything is changing, and we're just having to explore as we go. And that is unnerving for a lot of us. So I think that's one of the ways in which disability in the current situation affects our relationships, and how we could make it safer for people of all sorts of body minds to
That's
be able to do that for themselves.
that's true. I feel like all of us have a journey that we take in terms of understanding our body and pleasure. And just because sex ed is not so easily available to all of us, but people with disability probably have like a
Yeah,
longer journey in that sense. Because even the
yeah,
information that's
yeah.
available may not be available specifically to them, or like does not
Hmm.
address issues that
Cater
cater to,
to
yeah.
how their experience.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so when you and I spoke last time, you said something about Saint Valentine's and how Valentine's Day is actually celebration of queerness. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember reading that story as a kid, and basically saying, of course, it's set against a very Christian sort of context and such, because Saint Valentine was this person who was getting people who were in love, young couples who were in love, married in a kingdom, in a political atmosphere where it was not allowed, where it was frowned
Yeah.
upon, where the person in power didn't quite, it was forbidden by, power, the powers that were of the day. And I think that's what queerness is, right? There are forbidden ways of being, there are forbidden ways of loving, relating, that, uh, is what it makes us queer. We feel it within ourselves, but we're not able to kind of find a place for us in society the way it has been built and constructed. So I think that itself is celebration of queerness. So Valentine's Day is to kind of just validate all the ways in which you are and which you express love or relate to other people,
Absolutely. I can hear so many
according to
different
me.
hashtags coming in from here, like redefining Valentine's and how it's actually celebration of queerness more than anything else. So no, I think that's amazing. Okay, coming to a slightly more sort of intense question. Yesterday, I was speaking to Nitish Anand, and then we kind of started talking about how being a gay person in India is really difficult to like even understand, because the realities change every few years. Like 377 was just scraped off, and that gave them a legal identity as well. So things are changing every few years for everybody. So I just want to understand, like, how do we all find that sort of safe space to first find love, and then second express that love, like, and not just for gay people or not just for like queer people. All of us in India sort of don't have a safe space to kind of
Yeah.
express our love. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I don't want to discredit how safe people feel given this legal system and their household and external circumstances. But I also feel like for me personally, queerness is something that I had to first come to terms with about myself. You know, I had to hold that safe space and say, I could be queer in these ways, and that's okay. And that was a journey in itself. Like, yes, it was helpful for me when I found more queer people around me who expressed their gender and sexuality in terms that were non-normative. It was helpful for me to, when 377 was read down, when homosexuality was decriminalized in India, that was helpful for me. That did make me feel safer. But at the end of the day, I had to come to terms with it in myself. Even as we speak, there are ways in which I'm queer, which I've not probably reflected upon, which I've not completely accepted possibly, or which I'm not letting myself be. And that is my own journey. I think we should all, instead of thinking of other people's queerness and how it will affect us and how it will affect our relationships, we should all think of the ways in which we are forcing ourselves into a sort of a cookie cutting way of expressing our own identity and also kind of relating to other people, right? Like the sort of expectations that we have from even parents, at the end of the day, our parents are just human beings. Now that I'm the same age that my mother was when she gave birth to me, I realized that, the way I don't necessarily have my life figured out. And it's not like if I were to have a child or somebody in my responsibility, I would know exactly what to do every moment of the day.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to accept all of those things, the humanity of a lot of these relationships, just to be able to accept ourselves. So I think it's more important to create that safe space for ourselves, however we identify, whether we identify as queer or cishet, to create that space and say, I have this whole life ahead of me. And there are so many ways in which I can relate to all the people that I will come across. And there are so many ways in which I will express my identity that will go up and down, that will change through the time. That's the whole point of having a life ahead of you, not to just check off milestones, but to kind of unravel who you are as you go, and creating that safe space for yourself to express even in the privacy of a journal, if not in daily life, is what I think is important, is what we could do for our own selves.
Wow, that's that's really nice. Like, and I just love the kind of positive energy that you come with, uh, which is true.
Thank
That's
you.
again, I think we're still again redefining, or maybe like better understanding what safe spaces can be for all of us as individuals, not just.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm going to ask our next question, and this is again about safe spaces, but we see a lot of violence against even heterosexual couples, and it's not something in the past, it's still going on until like very recently we saw that there's violence against anybody who's expressing like love, any sort of PDAs. That's just people have been facing a lot of violence. How does,
Hmm.
even when heterosexual couples are facing that, how does a queer person, a lesbian couple, a gay couple sort of navigate through that? Or what are, I don't know about your experiences, but what are just like some things that we can do differently? Or, yeah, or what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I do agree there aren't as many legal protections for someone who doesn't present themselves as, cishet normative. But having said that, like we discussed, even cishet people, if, for instance, if you're not married but you're living in with someone, that itself has its own kind of diciness. It's not always very welcome by society. And even legally, only of late do we have all of these sort of court saying that yes, it is legally protected, but there is still a lot of, like the rug can always be pulled from under our feet. So I just wanted to add that, what can be done in these sort of situations is like what we've been talking about politically in terms of class struggle throughout. That's why the class struggle and the queer struggle is, according to me, not caste, class, race. All of these struggles are not very different from the queer struggle, because redistribution of justice, redistribution of wealth, and redistribution of resources, making sure it is not concentrated in certain people of certain identities' hands, is so important to make sure that all of us feel safe. All of us feel like we have agency and control over our lives and how we live it, the quality of our lives. So I think we need to think of ways that are more radical than just like looking for quick fixes. And when I say quick fixes, I mean like changing one particular law is not necessarily, it can have a ripple effect, but you have a growing ripple effect. And it's not the end all of, the revolution, the movement, so to speak.
Yeah, so a couple of years back, I was attending Mardi Gras, and that whole experience was very different for me because that was actually some sort of celebration. But here, when I attend something similar, it's more like a protest, which is, yeah, I just wish that we could fill that gap in very, very quickly in my lifetime, where but also like out there just celebrating. Yeah, but that was true.
That's the thing. I hear you. I see what you mean. And I grew up in rural Tamil Nadu for a few years, small villages, smaller towns, not cities. When my parents were living there and my father was working there. So I remember seeing a lot of these performances that were, they were not for, they were local religious performances, religious festivals, where people of a certain caste, historically oppressed caste, would dress up in certain ways that would be gender bending, gender fluid, and they would perform, they would express, and it was quite intense. It's not always about gender, they would also dress up playing different roles. Even in Kerala, I know there are a few traditions where people dress up a certain way, and it's a whole
Yeah.
performance. It's very ritualistic and it's intense. And the thing is, we have kind of made that a very small part of our lives, whereas we have filled our lives with so much of the mundane, so much of uh, we haven't allowed so much of chaos into our lives. We made everything very streamlined. When we drive to work, we are like, okay, we have to drive on the left. We take the same ways. We don't stop to smell the coffee anymore. I mean, stop to smell the flowers after the coffee anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why even social justice spaces, well, I do hear what you're saying, in that certain social justice spaces are so about like being politically correct and woke, especially online, right? And it's all about gatekeeping and saying you are this, you are that, I'm not this. It does. These platforms don't facilitate a conversation, dialogue, and human expression of who we are and seeing the other person for what they are. It's a very kind of reductivist kind of platform than what it would be in real life to engage with each other. So I do see that happening, but it's not necessarily the tale of all social justice spaces. Even in India, right? We do find community, we do find joy, we do find pleasure. And I think that's the idea of pleasure activism, where we say that if you're not finding pleasure, then it's not really activism. You have to see where the joy takes you. And where joy takes you, it takes you towards community. Joy doesn't take you away from community. And however that community is, in whatever capacity, in whatever intensity it is, that is something you can draw your boundaries around. But if your activism takes you away and makes you feel isolated, then it's not necessarily activism. It's not necessarily bringing joy to you or the community. And all activism ought to bring you joy and ought to bring you to community and the community to you. So, yeah, I'm not saying that it's not lacking, but I do see what you mean when there is so much, gatekeeping and sort of policing and what you say and how you present yourself and how you even protest, how you should present yourself while you're protesting.
Yeah, thank you so much for yeah, I wasn't fully, I didn't know where exactly was my question going, but yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense what you just said. Okay, but you said pleasure, so we're going to move on to talking about pleasure. There's a boom in the sexual wellness space. There are a lot of sex toys coming in the
Yeah.
market. Now, tell me, how is that sort of changing our relationship or understanding of pleasure and our own body? And yeah.
I think with like so many brands that are coming into this space, there is a lot more like on one hand, I do see how it's becoming like a commercially viable space, and that's why this conversation is more open. But I also feel like there are certain ways in which we are not acknowledging how much shame there is built up, how much trauma there is that has been built up over all of these decades, where we have shamed and made sex into some sort of a taboo-istic sort of aspect of our lives, which should only have a utilitarian, practical value of just reproducing and taking care of each other,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it's a tension that I am also holding. You know, on one hand, I do feel like it's become commercially viable, so it's also profitable to talk about these things. It's suddenly cool, but people have been trying to talk about these things, and they have been, you know, either criminalized or thrown into mental health, like not mental health institution, but like institutionalized, and they have been kind of discarded, alienated from society, and that is not. There is that skeletons in this closet that also needs to be acknowledged along with the sort of empowerment that we are feeling with this approach to sexual wellness in the conversation today. And that's a tension that I'm also holding and I'm also coming to terms with. So, but I am excited that the conversation is finally,
Yeah.
the ball has been set rolling, you know. So that's something that I'm definitely excited about.
Same. I would say that just accessibility to like all of these things now is definitely changing my own understanding of my own body. And all of a sudden,
But also like accessibility for whom?
that's true.
Accessibility for someone who can afford it, right?
Yeah.
Afford that kind of currency, right? So
But
there is still also that barrier that we should always kind of consider and keep in mind. I'm not saying it should stop you from engaging in how you're doing with it, but also like there is a tension that's like, okay, I'm able to access it only if I'm able to spend this kind of money.
absolutely.
What about the people who aren't, you know? Are they not deserving of pleasure? Only someone who owns a toy is deserving of pleasure and things
That
like that.
makes a
So
lot of
yeah,
sense, actually. That does, because yeah, I didn't think about it like that necessarily, but I think just like um, being able to like look at it and more now, being able to see that there is something like this available in the market is also probably like
absolutely.
change the narrative and discourse a little bit more than before. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And as the last question, I would like to just ask you, like, for people, for young people of any identity, any orientation, anybody, what should we do differently and what can we do differently this year or maybe this Valentine's Day? And there's a lot that you've already said. You've said so many things today. But as like a parting remark or anything that you'd say that we should definitely do differently or can do differently. Yeah.
Yeah, I think young people are extremely vulnerable. There is so much sort of messages that is coming from media, from our parents, and from a lot of places that they're exposed to. And we still, and I mean, I'm not young anymore, but young people are still coming to terms to who they are in the world and what the world is about, and finding their space in it. So stay open minded. Don't decide on who you are too early on. In fact, never decide on who you really are. See if you're comfortable. Check in with your body and see if you're feeling safe in your body, you know. And who are the people or who are the connections that make you feel safe, make you feel seen. Nurture those connections regardless of what people expect you to have from those connections or what expectations you have from those connections. Just find your space in your body and in those relationships. I would say keep exploring and trust your intuition.
Perfect. Thank you. That's actually lovely. I'd say I'm a young person, so I'm going to take this away with me. But thank you so much, Tejasvi, for joining us. I thoroughly have enjoyed this conversations.
I did too.
And
Thank you for
yeah,
having me.
perfect. Thank you. We're going to have another live with Noor discussing more about.
I'm excited to watch that.
Yeah, so perfect. We'll stay in touch. We'll do more
I'll
things.
get out of this
Yeah.
conversation. Bye.
Bye. Know if you are there. Um, just send a request so that I can see you. Yep. Hi, No. While No joins, I'm just quickly going to introduce No. No identifies as a non-binary disabled queer person and is a psychology grad from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, is a disability justice author, community organizer and occasional bad bitch. I love that. And they're the founder of Revival Disability Collective, a community for and by disabled folks in India. And for this particular live, we have partnered with their organization, Revival Disability Collective. No, if you are watching this, send me a request and invite again to join. Inviting No to join. Here we have No.
Hi.
Hi, No.
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. How
Yeah.
are you?
I'm good. Today's been like a bit difficult for me with anxiety and all, but yeah, I've been good. How have you been?
I am good, and thank you for joining us despite having not such a great day. I'm grateful that you're here with us again. Yeah, so let's begin because we are partnering with you here on the Cripple Times Week. I just want to understand what is Cripple Times Week and why. Why do we have it?
So, Krypton Times Week is we are trying to create an accessible Valentine's week. Like we started 7th to 14th of February, and so it comes from the word cripple, which is usually used as a slur to discriminate against disabled folks, but we are reclaiming it in a way where we talk about all kinds of love stories or not love stories. We talk about queer platonic love. We talk about a simple two queer lovers uh, uh, kissing and then eating rainbow color ice cream, and it's been really precious all these stories. We talk about a love story between a single woman and her vibrators. So it's been celebrating all kinds of love. We are trying to move out of the heteronormative, abled template of love. Tej was saying, how love has also been very coded in a way that it has become to mean only one thing, which is romantic and sexual. Then we are trying to look at love, which arises out of the friendship, friendships between disabled folk, community love, collective joy, and we also talk about. So the main theme is how disabled and queer folks have found love and joy within their own bodies during isolation. How we cope during isolation with intimacy, with arousal, with horniness, how we've not only found love within movement by going from one place to another, also found love via video calls or text or audio calls. And I think we also need to look at love as political, like who is allowed to who's allowed access to this love, who's allowed to be political in a way, who has access to these support systems, to resources, and yes, it is a crip revolution, but it's also a privilege, right? To have a crip revolution, to participate in a crip revolution, to have the vocabulary. Um, so through Captain Week, we are we are like exploring all of this. For example, tomorrow, we're going to publish something where my friend wrote a love letter to her own disabled body, you know, and how I wrote something about how I've given myself the space and agency to dream of disability affirmative love, right? Because in a world full of able-bodied love and rejection, we also need to begin to visualize a utopia where we can see our own kind of love. Yeah.
Thank you so much for like sharing this. I'm just like seeing how we are redefining this whole week, and this is amazing that we were able to be part of like your Valentine's week. Thank you for sharing that. Great. I'm going to actually move on to our next question. I think, yeah. Um, so we had discussed about how patriarchal this whole idea of love and pleasure is, anyways, and that's also something that we've partly discussed. I just want to ask you, like, what does it even look like to move beyond this heteropatriarchal idea of love and pleasure?
So I have a course in my master's called Women, Desires and Sexualities, and there we're learning about the history of sexuality and how during the Victorian era, sex was capitalized, right? It
Yeah.
was kind of given a very reproductive name that only useful when you uh, when you have sex for the purpose of reproducing, and
Yeah.
this kind of symbolizes so many identities, so many genders, so many abilities, right? So we are trying to obviously move out of that, and especially disabled women, non-binary and trans folk, are invisibilized in this narrative, in this very heteropatriarchal narrative. Some ways in which um, I see I move out of heteropatriarchal ways of sexual intimacy is by seeing the joy in sexual sexual intimacy, sexual engagement, whatever that looks like for each one of us, whether that's like uh, whether that looks like instead of using condoms for the specific purpose, we just use condoms as balloons and then blow the condoms and then laugh our asses off.
Yeah.
So just having a lot of joy and a lot of laughter in sex. And uh, whether it's like um, using our vibrators not only for self-pleasuring, but also playing with it and personifying it, or like doing digital art on it, right? Like giving a vibrator a name, and not only like being very serious about sex, but like playing around, laughing, and just like seeing it as a very fun thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's how we move out of heteropatriarchal ideas of sex, not only seeing it as a reproduction, uh, an idea of reproduction, but seeing it as pleasure and fun and intimacy and orgasms. Definitely orgasms. Yeah, yeah.
That's really interesting, because when I put this question, I thought I was going to get, I don't know, it was more sort of going to be rebellious, more protest, but I love how getting out of this heteropatriarchal idea of love is to find fun in it, to find humor, to create, to make it more fun. And yeah, I think that's a bigger rebellion than anything else. And yeah, thanks for giving me those ideas, Lou. Thank you. Um, Okay, so for the next question, I just wanted to sort of explore consent and want to understand that how do you consent when you cannot verbally give consent? Because the idea of consent becomes like very like no means no and yes is okay, but how do you do it if you cannot verbally give consent? Yeah.
So, for example, if you are if you cannot verbally give a consent due to any reason, not only due to disability, but if you simply get too overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
During sexual intimacy, you can't speak, you can't verbally give it. Again, these coded rules of intimacy have always told us that okay, you have to say yes or no, right? You have to tell them, use the auditive function and tell them yes or no. But when you can't do that, then that definitely doesn't mean you're weak or something. But because verbally is not the only form of communication. So what you can do is, for example, just use like a squishy ball that you get. Um, just like push it for yes, and then you can drop it for no, right? Something as easy as that. That something as like just devise a mechanism around it, right? Just because I can't say yes or no because I have a speech disability or it's just so overwhelming. Doesn't mean all the entire onus of assault or the entire onus of responsibility should be on me, right? As a single non-binary person. And that doesn't mean I shouldn't engage in sexual intimacy either. Because if every non-disabled person is doing it, why shouldn't the same person have all the fun, right? And yeah, so you can like devise your own method and yeah, so these are all ways in which you make the entire process of communication
Yeah.
or verbalizing in a way, right? You're making them accessible and you're moving out of the abled norms of society. Yeah.
That's really interesting because as I'm listening to you, I'm like, this is not just like moving out of this able body narratives around everything. Also gives us or also give like people who have able bodies a different way of looking at it, different way of exploring consent, different way of exploring just even pleasure and love, and that's actually really interesting. Just to like, I think that just might just make consent easier for certain people. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely, because accessibility is not only to make the lives of disabled folks easier. It's
yeah.
meant for every one of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Physical accessibility or accessibility in communication, um, uh, all structure of accessibility. We are trying to make love accessible, right? Through this live, through this conversation, through Valentine's Day. Tej and you spoke about, love for asexual women. How sending roses doesn't only have to mean romance,
Mm-hmm.
right? It can
Yeah.
also mean care and care and compassion and accent and kindness of everything. So how we all grew up with like I don't know romantic comedies and like these movies where you were told that okay you're going to find one person for the rest of your life. You have to be compulsory heterosexuality For the longest time, I was like, okay, I have to date. But
Yes.
I have to date a boy. This man. Because I was assigned female at birth. So I have to automatically date someone who's the opposite gender. Right? All this. Because it was drilled into me through movies. And I find out one person who's going to be with me for the rest of my life. And that one person I can't live without. Like I need to be dependent on that one person. Because women are always taught to, through movies, through other forms of media, they are taught there's a culture of dependency, I feel, on a significant other, and to move out of that and find a kind of disabled independence. Because it's still a process for me, right? And honestly, half an hour, 1 hour ago, I was like crying. I was crying because I don't have a Valentine for tomorrow. Now I don't care. But in that moment I was crying because this is so coded in all of us. Just because I'm talking about it doesn't mean I'm completely unknown. Right? And that's okay. It's like a process. And the entire thing is a process to unconditionally love my pure disabled self is a process, what I'm still learning, and that's all right too. And vulnerability is definitely a celebration. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, thank you for joining us despite that little breakdown that you had. And just yesterday, we were talking to Nitish and people asked what were his plans for Valentine's. And it was also to just spend time with oneself, accepting, just pleasuring our own
Yeah.
body, accepting everything that we are. So yeah, no, thank you, thank you for joining again. Great. Okay, so our next question is a little bit serious, and all of a sudden I don't want to ask it, but I'm just going to ask because it's there. Okay, so what would you like to tell someone who's confused about their identity or disabled
Yeah.
body or survivors of abuse? Where can they seek support and speak about their stories? What are some platforms existing for them or some support systems existing for them? Yeah.
Let me start by saying that allowing yourself to seek support or like allowing yourself to feel better, right? Allowing yourself um to like to seek support and tell yourself that you're not weak for seeking support is also like a long process. Okay, and for the longest time I was numb and loathing my own disabled body, right? For like 22 years of my life, and I could never find any, say, informal support group where kind of disabled folks are just allowed to be a very relaxed space where we just take up space on our own terms, in whichever way we desire, right? Where movement is not a norm, right? I'm referring again to movement because in an able-bodied world, in a non-disabled world, rest is something which is really frowned upon, right? Um, and then I created a space. Um, I created the space, and then I realized that this space and its community members really empowered me in a way to accept my own queer disabled body. Like when I was in the process of forming it, I didn't know. It was full of chaos in my mind. What is the shape? What is the identity? And what is the space? And then I found uh, books, online. And in online spaces who really taught me about my identity. And they definitely taught me how to see the power in my disability. Um, so I really feel that you can definitely join our community, the viral disability community. And we also have um we also have a campaign called Disabled Women Riot, which is not only for disabled women but even non-binary and trans folk, where which is a campaign where survivors of abuse or violence kind of they speak out, right? They don't only speak out, they speak out and speak in, because we don't always have to speak speak up in the literal sense of the term. Um, Not everyone has to name their abusers, right? They can be anonymous. It's just a space where we allow ourselves to feel disabled rage. And it started as an anonymous account on Twitter. My same name, same woman, and we have our community members um using this account anonymously, and whatever they want to, whatever message they want to put out there, right? Um, they use this Twitter account, and it's also a campaign where we believe disabled women, which is really important, right? And it's also a movement where we move out of the this normative Me Too movement, which is not given so much of space to disabled folk to kind of speak out and just feel disabled rage. That is the main point. Yeah. And I would also like to say that um, seeking support and resources and seeking help, right? Having access to help is also a privilege that a lot of us don't have, right?
Absolutely.
And we are trying to make it more accessible for everyone. And there's this dilemma in India to be politically assertive and disabled in India, right? To say proudly that I'm disabled and proud, right? To say this term is also also privilege. Not kind of given to inspiration porn or this idea of about motivation that disabled folks have to motivate able-bodied folks to kind of be more grateful about their lives, right? Not given to the internalized ableism trope. It's also a privilege, which we are trying to make accessible to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Also, thank you for doing the work that you do. I think all of a sudden just seems like reaching out is not that difficult, or telling one's stories or accessing resources doesn't seem such an overwhelming thing anymore. So, yeah. Okay, so for our last question, and I love this question, although I've written it, but what are some of the love stories you would like to hear in the mainstream media? What are some love stories that are missing,
Hmm.
but we definitely want to hear about? Or yeah, so tell me about that.
So kind of like all the love stories that we've written so far, whether it's in Valentine's Week or whether it's all year long about disabled intimacy and pleasure, whether it's about coming home to your disabled body or the rebellious radical act of queer disabled love, or what it's like to be gay and iconic, um from to be gay and actually blind and by condoms the cello, or whether it's about queer platonic love, um uh, so many love stories I would like to visualize and um, see them on screen. And most of all, I want these stories to be told by disabled and queer folk for disabled and queer folk. Right? That's the most important thing. And through revival, we are also trying to create a culture of a disabled culture, and trying to create like an archive, an online archive of um, disabled and queer love, an essential how-to guide on what it's like to be disabled and queer, right, for future generations. As Mia Mingles, a disability justice activist says, we need to leave behind evidence that disabled people have existed and will continue to exist. We need to leave behind evidence that we've loved, we've lived, and we've grieved. So definitely I want all these love stories to um like come
Yes,
along.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally, I agree with you, and I can't say again. Love the work that you do. Definitely want to see lot more love stories, lot more just understanding love in a more broader sense, in a more holistic manner. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us again, Noor. This was wonderful. So much to take back from everything that you just shared with us. And yeah, happy Valentine's week and day to you too. Perfect. We will continue to engage with you. I think I am loving this sort of relationship that we're building here.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thanks, Noor. Thank you. Bye.
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 Should I?
Yeah, I'll just do it. Yeah. Perfect. So, thank you all for joining us. So much to learn from our conversations with Tej and Noor today. Just redefining Valentine's, just redefining love and pleasure, um, and consent as well. So, yeah, thank you for joining and happy Valentine's Day.